Welcome. Thank you for joining the Insurance Journal webinar featuring Informatica and Hortonworks on how to become an analytics-ready insurer. Our presenters today are Cindy Mikey and Josh Lee. Cindy Mikey is GM of Insurance at Hortonworks and is responsible for the Center of Excellence for Insurance and the go-to-market strategy for the industry, assisting clients with driving enhanced business value from their data. She has over 25 years of finance, consulting, and advisory services experience in the insurance industry, assisting clients globally with their business and IT strategy with a specific focus on the business strategy and the usage of analytics to drive results. Cindy has a deep industry knowledge in both claims and underwriting with a focus on the usage of analytics and data to enhance business outcomes. She previously held positions at insurance carriers, Accord, management consulting, and research and advisory services firm Strategy Meets Action, where she was a co-founder. Cindy has also held accounting and finance positions and is a CPA. She is passionate about solving business problems and eternally believes in process improvement and strongly believes that today's next-generation business intelligence in the form of advanced analytics will revolutionize the insurance industry. We also have Josh Lee. Josh Lee leads global marketing for Informatica in insurance, engaging directly with the insurance marketplace to drive strategy, vision, and innovation of everything data in insurance. Josh is an insurance technology industry professional with experience spanning over 17 years in technology, insurance, financial services, and consulting. Josh's experience includes marketing, enablement, and strategy at Microsoft, including holding several technology patents. He drove innovation at Risk Management Solutions, driving value for clients and the marketplace. Josh also ran delivery for insurance and financial services at MicroStrategy, seeing firsthand the value of a robust and enterprise strategic data ecosystem from end to end. Besides enterprise data, Josh is passionate about photography, gourmet cooking, and his wonderful family. It is my pleasure to turn things over to Cindy Mikey.
Allison, thank you. Josh and I are pleased to be able to speak to the group today to discuss how to become an insurance-ready analytic insurance company. So as we look at data that's around us in the insurance industry and even in our day-to-day lives, data never really sleeps. We're now at a point in time in our lives where every minute, every second, every day, we're generating new sources of data and information, whether it's coming from email, if it's coming from Google, it's coming from tweets, it's coming from posts, or coming from sensor-based information that's coming out of a connected home, out of a connected car, or whether it's being generated by a device on equipment that's being monitored for productivity, and how can we then leverage that? So let's look about, what are the new data types that are influencing what's going on in the industry, whether it be a property casualty company, whether you're a reinsurance, and then also even in the health and annuity side. We have new data sources that is being made available, and companies are wanting to analyze that, whether it be information that's coming from internet, from Twitter, from a sentiment perspective, whether I have clickstream information about how I'm trying to engage with a customer from a digital interaction, or whether it be on the website, or if I'm doing call center, to before I mentioned the capabilities around sensors, the information that's coming from vehicles, things that are coming from the connected home, the geographic information of how do I analyze the risk, down to what's going on in our environments from a server log perspective. So all very interesting items. And then also one area that we can't forget is the new types of information, or the existing information that's coming from unstructured information, and how do I leverage all these new types of data and blend that together with what's going on with our traditional data sources. So at Hortonworks, we as an organization really help companies to the journey of creating a data lake. And what is a data lake? Well, Hadoop originally started as kind of a cost optimization of how do I take a lot of the information that's coming from the website, whether I was, and Hortonworks was an offshoot of Yahoo. And if I look at what Yahoo, Google, Facebook, they leverage Hadoop at the core to analyze their various information. Hadoop originated as a cost optimization, but companies are now truly leveraging Hadoop to enable the advanced analytic capabilities by bringing in the traditional data sources, and Josh will talk about the capabilities of Informatica as it pertains to this, but then also bringing all that information of traditional along with the new. I'm bringing into it a centralized architecture where I can look at any application with any data and be able to blend the two data sources together to truly unlock new areas of business insight into the industry. So as we look at this from an insurance industry perspective, is how do I take the information that's coming from various different business applications? In our industry, like any other industry, we have a lot of disparate data sources and data processes. And the utopia has always been, how do I make all data accessible and searchable, whether it be structured, unstructured, new streaming information, and so forth. So within the Hadoop platform, we're able to bring that information together in the concept of a data lake to bring new types of business insight to the insurance industry. So what does that mean from an architectural perspective? And this is probably the only technical diagram that I'll show. But Hadoop fundamentally is an enabler of the new types of information, being able to bring data down into the Hadoop data file structure, being able to ingest information from your traditional data sources, and Josh will talk a little bit about the capabilities of Informatica and how that plays into that, to also bringing in your data repositories, whether it be your product information, your finance, your claims, and then being able to look at that information, attach and leverage current capabilities that I'm used to. So if I want to leverage additional analytical tools, but it's the ability to bring data down into a very scalable data repository of Hadoop, being able to leverage a component that's referred to as Yarn that allows for Hadoop to do multiple data analysis and I'll use the concept of multi-tenant. So I can process information in an environment that has multi-purposes, and I can repurpose data in various areas and then access that through my analytical tools. So it's the one place that I can bring traditional data sources along with new data sources and continue to access it with tools that I'm very much used to using today to do my analytics, or maybe even some new areas where I'm looking to do some machine learning and advanced analytics using Spark and so forth. So Hadoop is an open source technology available to anyone to use within their enterprise. So we're seeing a lot of use cases start to leverage the modern data architecture to enable advanced analytics. So the use cases that we're really seeing, at least from a Hortonworks perspective, working with our customers, are really about what's going on with the change in the customer engagement model. And within that, how do I get that 360, and also some companies are using the term a 720. So being able to look at both data that's inside my enterprise and then also blending that with outside information, so getting that holistic internal and external perspective. Additionally, we're seeing an explosion of data in the risk analysis area. So how do I leverage information, whether it's coming from sensors, whether it's coming from third-party data sources, additional predictive models, whether or not I'm in the home area, how am I using maybe the concept of a connected home and that type of information to move from the traditional product-based insurance company to more of a prevention-based. Early adopters are doing discounts on homeowners insurance by having some form of a connected home device, where other insurance companies are truly exploring how do I leverage the information that's going on within my home, either from a security perspective with sensors on appliances and other forms of utilities to help monitor the activities, and should that allow for a discount or a new prevention services coming out of the insurance industry. One of the predominant high areas that I'm seeing is really around, from an analytics perspective, is what can I do to leverage the current and the new data and even current data that I could not easily get to before. So within the claims notes, how do I marry that type of information with my, core systems information to do advanced predictive analytics around frequency and severity models? How do I look at being able to look at areas of e-discovery? And that aspect is I can now access information, look at speed and time at an accident, proximity of information, the application of brakes, to the capabilities of product liability and so forth. So the new data sources that are available to us as an industry and being able to enhance some of our traditional analytics, and Josh and I both believe in, it's the advanced analytics and what does that actually mean. So it's marrying that old with the new to create that new system of insight. So when I look at the opportunities for the industry, it's truly, we're seeing a lot of companies that are continuing to do optimizing their current capabilities of an EDW offload, maybe into more of a commodity-based data platform, to being able to take that existing data, blend it with some new information such as clickstream, to be able to create recommendation engines for next best action, to the components of how do I enhance my severity models, to the point of from the areas of real opportunity, in my belief, is really leveraging that new data with new types of analytics. So how do I look at maybe claim anomalies, be able to enhance my fraud analysis and detection, being able to use machine learning to enable more 100% areas of evaluating areas of claims leakage in the industry, to the notion of also being able to look at new predictive data that's coming from external data sources that we may not have been able to model in our traditional areas. So really it's that blend of the old and the new to create the new systems of insight. So a little bit about Hortonworks. Hortonworks originated about 3.5 years ago. We were actually an offshoot of 24 of the original developers of Hadoop at Yahoo. We're currently an organization that has grown to over 600 people with 800 different ecosystem partners. We're growing quite rapidly. Companies are really being able to understand the value of Hadoop into their environments by being able to bring that centralized multi-tenant data architecture. And being able to, us as a company, given, I mentioned that Hadoop is actually open source. So what does that mean? Open source is available for anyone to download and use at no cost. Hortonworks, what we provide is we're 100% committed to the open source environment, and we provide subscription services. And what is the subscription service? It's actually the support. So when you're in an open source environment, if you have questions or I need education and training about Hadoop and how do I leverage that, Hortonworks is the provider of that. We also do the enterprise grade testing of the Hadoop platform to make sure that it's enterprise ready for organizations to leverage. One of our great partners in this area is actually Informatica as well as other, but that partnership with Informatica is quite important to us. And on that, the features and the benefits of leveraging both an Informatica and Hortonworks is being able to visualize your development environment, being able to operationalize it with Informatica, they're being able to leverage their high-performance connectors and then blend that and connect it to the HTTP in a much faster area, enhancing the data quality. And as we look at companies that are looking to enable a data lake, you want to make sure that you continue to use those data quality aspects because you don't want that data lake to turn into a data swamp. So Informatica brings some of those key components to the environment. Additionally, we have joint reference architectures and joint engineering efforts with Informatica. Informatica has over 100,000 trained developers in the industry that are blending existing along with the big data capabilities in the industry. So what I'd like to, before turning it over to Josh, is I think as we look at the analytics environment for the insurance industry. I think it's the time where, as an industry, we need to look to leverage both the current data and new data, and to look outside of our industry, what's going on in the retail, in the telecommunication industries around advanced analytics and customer interaction. We can leverage that type of information, especially from a personal lines perspective in the insurance industry, is leverage that. And also, don't let the knowledge that's in the data be an area where we stumble. We also need to make sure that when you look at the big data capabilities, is make sure that you understand the skills that are required, and then also leverage the right technology where it's important. So some areas there may be the need to continue to use current technology and so forth. And I think the biggest thing is don't fear to experiment in this area, and truly look to capitalize on the opportunity that is in front of us to be able to offer new innovative products and to attract new customers and being able to serve those customers in an area. So some closing thoughts, and I love Jim Carroll from a futuristic perspective, is some people see a trend and see a threat, but innovators see the same trend and see an opportunity. So I leave that with you as I turn it over to Josh to talk about Informatica and their capabilities, leveraging big data. Josh?
Thanks so much, Cindy. And we're really excited to be partners with Hortonworks in some of the areas around big data and Hadoop distributions, and especially the things that we see going on within the industry. So I want to talk a little bit about just some of the additional scenarios, some of the things related to data and analytics that are important to insurers. They're important to everybody, but it really comes to the forefront within insurance. As insurance is, what I would characterize insurance as is insurance is really in the business of analytics. Everything that insurers do really relies on analytics to process their business. And so, what I've seen personally in the marketplace is some real expertise and best practices around analytics to run insurance business. But it's important that we keep a few things in mind. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Let's drill into just a little bit about who Informatica is for those on the call who perhaps don't know Informatica very well. Informatica has been in business for several decades and has, I would say, in financial services and insurance is one of the largest markets that we service. Have most of the top providers in the banking and the insurance marketplace using the technology in any numbers of varieties of ways. Apologies, a little bit of a slide problem there. So within the insurance space, we service a lot of the big logos, the big insurers that are globally well known. And from just a raw technology perspective, Informatica is one of the leaders. It is a leader in virtually every Magic Quadrant that Gartner has with regard to data quality, data integration, master data, and in many cases is the #1 leader in the leaders quadrant within Gartner. And that's important because of the innovation that Informatica has been providing for insurance companies and for financial services companies with regard to moving their data and making value out of the data that sits in the enterprise. Why is this important really from an insurance perspective? Let's talk a little bit about why insurers do analytics. So as I mentioned, the business of insurance really is hinging on the business of analytics. So some of the top things that we see and things that we see within the marketplace and trends are as follows. And first of all, insurers obviously need to grow revenue. One of the interesting statistics is that there's roughly about an 85 to 87% non-renewal or attrition rate that's common within, especially personal lines insurance. which means that the average insurer must add about 13% new policyholders to maintain flat revenue. And what that means is that there's a constant churn within the portfolio of the folks that are non-renewing. Now, some would say, well, those are the transients folks that are constantly out there searching for the latest and greatest deal every year when they renew. But it doesn't really matter whether they're transient or not. What that does mean is that those new clients need to be found, that 13% new policyholders, just to maintain flat revenue. What insurers do, and what I've seen in working directly with several insurance companies, are looking for ways not only to grow revenue, to grow that 13% to say closer to 15, 18, 20% in order to increase revenue, but also increase the penetration, the product penetration within the existing policyholder base. So statistics will typically show that as you analyze the data, that someone with 2 products per household is much less likely to attrite or to non-renew their policy as someone with 1 policy. If you think about the 1 policy, policyholder is the person who goes out and shops for the best price for their auto insurance. Maybe they're a college student, maybe they're in the younger demographic, and then next year they're doing it again. Whereas once you get to 2 or 3 policies per household and you're bundling your policies together, you're much less likely to attrite. And that's an analytical task to understand exactly what insurers need to offer to their policyholders in order to make them much more relevant within their lives. Second, combating fraud, and Cindy had mentioned some of the things related to claims. Obviously, that's where a lot of fraud happens. The Department of Justice says that non-healthcare related insurance fraud tops over $40 billion a year, and that drives up premiums per household by about $700 per year, just because obviously insurers need to make up for that shortfall in fraud and leakage within their premium base. And this is a big problem. So what does that mean from a data perspective? From a data perspective, that means that additional data needs to be analyzed, longer periods of data, much more unstructured data. A lot of fraud investigation now is leveraging new data sources, as Cindy mentioned, like social and unstructured data, as investigators look to figure out how to combat fraud and how to do that in a more automated way. Developing new products, as I mentioned, in coordination with growing revenue, looking at new product mixes. There's any numbers of changes that are going on especially within the United States and globally with regard to demographics. As an example, by 2030, it said that the over 65 demographic will be 20% of the population. These are the baby boomers, the ends of the baby boom that are retiring, that need new products, that need a new view on what insurance products are offered to them. You can make the same correlation with regard to other types of demographics, like the growth of the Hispanic marketplace in certain areas of the United States. And what does that mean from a product development perspective? And so some analytics needs to take place not only to identify what the trend is, what the demographic or the socioeconomic trends are, but also then to look at the rates and rules that are behind the new products that need to be developed and making those profitable. Lastly, reducing risk. Insurance really is all about the business of risk. As an example, since 2013, we all kind of know what's the big debate, and we're not going to talk about the politics of fracking, but the big debate has been around how that has impacted the growth and the swarms of earthquakes that are happening within Oklahoma. Now, there's a geologic argument there, but over 50% growth of magnitude 3+ earthquakes in Oklahoma. Well, what that means is that insurers rely on models to actually look at the risk within that geographic area. But if the models aren't being updated in a sufficiently timely fashion, then insurers need to look at other types of analytics to augment their models and look at pricing. And that's an analytical task. It relies on a number of different data elements. So we've all seen kind of good analytics and bad analytics. In the top left here, I've got a very, very simple heat map. We all know what heat maps are. Heat maps are fun and interesting things, and they can be really powerful explanations of data. But more than once, I've actually been in an organization and worked with insurers where you connect to some source of data, want to create a heat map, and you create it, and you end up with a monochromatic representation of data for any variety of reasons. How does this happen? It happens because the data is unclean, not categorized correctly, such that you can break out the different quadrants within your heat map. Perhaps the data sources, the actual mathematical or numerical values behind the calculations are incorrect. They haven't been defined correctly by analysts, or maybe they have, but they haven't flowed through to the actual then data that's stored. And you end up with something that looks, monochromatic or only a couple colors, and then you kind of wonder, well, I saw this really cool screenshot, and that's what I wanted, or I wanted a completely different visualization, but the data is not lending itself that way. And so you really have to look at kind of, good analytics and bad analytics. Bad analytics can happen all the time. And one of the things that we talk a lot about at Informatica is we talk about becoming analytics ready, becoming decision ready as an organization, and that analytics drives business decisions. And without the data, without the good data, without the correct data in a timely fashion, you can't make good business decisions. Obviously, even with good data, you can still make bad business decisions. So that's a different problem, the cultural problem. But you really need to get to that good source of data, the good clean data, and in a timely fashion to be able to get to what you may want to see on the bottom right, which is some really cool data visualizations. And if you go out on the internet, you can find all sorts of really, really, really cool data visualizations that are informative, that tell a story, and that really can help someone make a good business decision. But you're never going to get there, never, unless you have good data management practices, good data movement, and quality to walk through that process. So where does my data come from? This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but we can put it into a couple different categories. I get my data from applications as one. This is one of the most common areas where I get my data from, whether it's an agency management system, whether it's a policy administration system, my core internal ERP systems, my financials, or my CRM. The number of applications that you can get your data from is innumerable. It's usually structured. Most of these applications have a good database sitting underneath them, but it needs to be integrated. If I want to take a little bit of stuff from my policy administration system and then some stuff from my agency management and combine the two things together to get some new insights, I need to integrate that data together. So one, it may be easier to get it out because it's a little bit more structured and it sits in a centrally located place. But I need to integrate those things together. Different fields are called different things, and that's where the integration comes in, as well as quality, different formats, and formatting addresses or formatting numbers or looking at calculations so that I'm comparing like for like and I'm getting some meaningful analytics. A lot of files happen within I guess it's an interesting term. Files happen within insurance. If you're faxing PDFs everywhere, you've got somewhat unstructured data that needs to be read out into a machine format. You've got lots and lots of Excel files with, I've seen everything out to column ZZ. And what that means is that you just got a copious amounts of data sitting in Excel files and various file structures, Word documents, again, like PDFs that need to be read out, structured data brought in to systems so that you can do additional analytics, or even just doing basic underwriting with those file structures can be a challenge. So the structure varies, or it's completely absent or fluid. So one, the integration is required for sure, but also then the structure needs to be massaged and processed. Custom structures, we see the growth of mobile and personal devices. We see custom applications, a lot of, Cindy had mentioned, wearable devices, all of this custom and just new stuff that happens almost every day. So the structure is indeterminate. It needs to be kind of very quickly understood and or moved into a place where it can be understood and combined with real data. And then, of course, structured data, homegrown custom apps where, the formats and the storage are a little bit constrained, because if you think about a third or fourth normal form database, it's a traditional data structure. It's a data warehouse, maybe a data mart, star, or snowflake schemas. So the formats are fairly well understood, but they can be constrained, and the storage can be constrained. And this is where something like a data lake, as Cindy mentioned, can come into play, because you take all these different formats, you integrate some of them, you massage, you put some quality checks into place, and then you put them into a data lake, a Hortonworks infrastructure, such that then you can start to do analytics. You can start to actually make some meaningful sense in ways that you hadn't before, perhaps because you have more of it. Maybe you have longer time series. All these different things can come into play once you have a more flexible and robust data infrastructure. Because you want to make the most of your data infrastructure. The reality is everybody has lots of data sources. The traditional data warehouses, the traditional structured relational databases, transactional, operational databases, they're not going away. They're going to be there forever. And in fact, you know, I'm probably going to die and still see mainframes at an insurance company. That's probably never going to change. And so maybe it's a little sad. It is what it is. But they're going to be there. The reality is, though, that new types of data are coming up every day. You know, Cindy had mentioned the social data, web logs, marketing traffic that happens with people's websites, partnerships and trade and business-to-business relationships that you have that create new forms of data every day that need to be analyzed and need to be brought into the system. And so using a technology like Informatica to bring that data into the infrastructure, create the data quality rules and the infrastructure that needs to be able to support the movement of that data into a more flexible, a more scalable, and a future-proof infrastructure like Hortonworks, and making that reusable, making it something that you're not having to reinvent the wheel every single time, that the business rules that you encapsulate to clean your data and to make sense out of your data from a quality perspective can be reused, can be managed and governed, so that when you define a piece of data or define a rule, that can be an organizational enterprise definition that can then be managed and audited and so forth. And then the data volume is growing. I mean, Informatica has charts. Everybody has charts that talk about the growth of data, the explosion of data from you know, gigabytes to terabytes to petabytes to exabytes. You know, lots of bytes. So that's never going to change. And what we see within insurance companies as well as other financial services firms is that the appetite for spending the hundreds of millions of dollars for traditional data appliances is decreasing. It's waning. And the appetite for looking at more flexible, scalable data infrastructures like Hortonworks is growing because of this volume of data, because of the flexibility needed in the data to be able to run analytics. Because looking at the benefits to insurers, what are some of the things that we see insurers doing? Look, first of all, you know, if you look at you know, just like catastrophe analysis and things that insurers need to do to manage their risk from a hurricane perspective. You know, the Atlantic Basin is changing almost every year. Some years we see more, some years we see less hurricanes. I think last year a hurricane actually found its way to Bermuda, which people in the reinsurance community of Bermuda think hardly ever happens because Bermuda is so hard to find. But there's more storms, right? And there can be more storms in different tracks. The more things I can analyze using more data, the more powerful my analytics becomes, the more accurate my risk picture becomes. I can reduce the numbers of standard deviations that I'm taking out of that data in order to come up with a good price and price my portfolio and look at my overall risk. So that's one. I mentioned, you know, earthquakes in Oklahoma. There's all sorts of different things with regard to catastrophe risk that can be leveraged better within a Hortonworks infrastructure because of the volume of data and the flexibility of data. Second, portfolio optimization. If you look at what insurers would like to do with their portfolios, they, you know, looking at the current portfolio in terms of size and on the risk-return curve, and being able to understand where do I want my portfolio to go, and then coming up with some business strategies. So there's an analytics element to this, which means having the good, clean data, having a good, accurate data within my portfolio, so that I can actually find out where it is on this curve. And two, then the business strategy behind, once I understand that data, once I understand possible destinations of where that optimal portfolio needs to be, I can then make a business decision based on, you know, is it changing my renewal strategy? Is it looking at business acquisitions and or divestitures of pieces of my portfolio in order to get to where you want on that risk return? I want to be on the risk return curve. Cindy had mentioned device data. there's data just coming from everywhere. And it's not just telematics in cars. You know, if we look at commercial insurance and all of the different Internet of Things devices that could say be on oil rigs or be on commercial aviation, all of this different data needs to be made sense of. And right now I would say there's some big question marks in terms of, one, how I get the data, what state it's in. You know, there's a lot of holes in that data. It needs to be cleaned. It needs to be standardized, et cetera. And then how do I make sense of it? How do I combine it with my structured known data that I've had for many, many years to look at pricing strategies, to look at claims and fraud, or everything related to that. And then lastly, looking at bigger and more diverse populations. There's been a lot of coarseness in the past around the population of, say, policyholders, where you maybe put policyholders within large buckets. So you'd say, okay, I have an 18 to 35-year-old bucket. I have a 36 to 50-year-old bucket. What if I can make that a little bit more granular and define who's in that bucket from a gender perspective, from an income perspective, and maybe even looking at different demographics, ethnicities, spending patterns, and then bringing in other things like social and, for instance, Facebook sentiment data, and creating a more diverse population so that you can offer better products, get better return on revenue, and raise your retention rates. And these are some of the benefits, real tangible business benefits. But again, going back to the data, all of these different scenarios really rely on the availability of data, which means moving it through the organization, making sense of it, making sure it's clean in a way that actually then creates consistency within the organization. And all of that needs to happen first before these decisions and strategies can be put into place. So, you know, we really, in our partnership with Hortonworks, we really have a powerful analytics foundation. On the top left, I've got a screenshot of a new product that Informatica launched called Informatica Rev, which is a data preparation and data harmonization technology, which allows you to actually look at data sources in an Excel-like interface, but then make sense of it. Look at the trends in the data. Look at what's happening with regard to the quality. Maybe being able to actually write some rules to massage that data a little bit before it then goes into an infrastructure. So you've discovered it, you've shaped it a little bit, and then you leverage it through an infrastructure in Hortonworks. And likewise, then the traditional Informatica, we call it Power Center, which is the technology that we use to actually create the automation, the enterprise scalable jobs that then integrate that data into Hortonworks from wherever those different sources, as I already talked about, the applications and files, et cetera, and the quality rules that are necessary to actually then get it into Hortonworks. Because once I can get it in there, then I can do some magical things with analytics. I can stick some analytical tools, whether it's predictive analytics through a SAS or an R, or traditional visualization analytics like Tableau, to be able to leverage the data that sits within Hortonworks. And because it's sitting in Hortonworks, because it's more highly scalable, more cost-effective, and perhaps more available in terms of the types of data that I'm looking at, I can get much more rich analytics to drive my insurance. So thank you very much for listening to this webinar. We'd like to take some questions, and I guess could we open up Cindy's line as well?
Thanks, Josh. We've got a couple of questions that came in, and the first one is, can I get an evaluation copy of Hortonworks and Informatica to try a POC? At the end, after we get through the questions, we'll actually put up a next steps, and within that, there'll be a link to download a sandbox of HDP 2.2 from Hortonworks. And just so everyone knows, the Hortonworks platform is 100% open source. There is no cost to open source technologies. If you want to continue to use the capabilities of HDP, you're free to do so. Where Hortonworks provides capabilities is actually around the subscription support. What does that mean? Do I want to have like a number to call for 24/7 support of the Hadoop platform? That's where Hortonworks provides. So we are 100% committed to the open source environment, and working with Informatica on some joint engineering efforts. That allows
the community as a whole to actually, get the value of Hadoop. We are one of, several Hadoop distributions, but again, as I mentioned, the only one that is 100% open source. Josh, there's a question here for you. I'm going to pass this one on. It says, I already have investment in a lot of traditional, in a traditional data appliance. Is this the next logical step? And I'm looking for a similar size investment in a big data infrastructure. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, so that's a great question. First of all, I think, as I mentioned, there will always be traditional data sources that are floating around, and in many cases, those are the systems of record. But I would say, let's always look to the future. And if we think about the future of data innovation, the Hortonworks and Hadoop distribution is the next logical step. So I don't think that there's an insurer that we work with within Informatica that's not implementing a Hadoop infrastructure, and in many cases they're leveraging them to great extent, for actuarial, for finance, et cetera. So it is the next logical step. Now, in terms of investment, I mean, Cindy, that may be, obviously, not a lot of folks on webinars will talk about prices, but everything that I've seen is, and Cindy can validate this, everything that I've seen is it's a fraction of the cost in terms of traditional data warehouse or traditional data appliances. Cindy, care to comment on that?
Yeah, and that's, like I said, that's one of the beauties of working with Hadoop is, Hadoop itself is open source, no usage for that, and what one of the next questions I see is typically how do you see a POC get started? There's getting to a data lake, in my mind, is always a journey because you've got to start out with, what's the vision, what am I actually trying to achieve from the construct of a data lake, and we can't forego, what am I trying to enable? So I tell companies, start small, walk, run, or crawl, walk, run. No different than any other area, but what we're seeing is the opportunity in a POC is crawling, and the business value seen in that the crawl stage happens very quickly from a Hadoop perspective, and from a cost perspective. I typically see, and whether it's Hortonworks or it's any other Hadoop distribution, is it's typically based upon the number of nodes that you use from a subscription, and it's a far less cost than in maybe some traditional areas. And I typically see a POC get started around a subject area, as Josh mentioned, maybe something in claims fraud analytics. That might be one area. Some of the other interesting use cases is how do I make leverage of clickstream, Facebook, Twitter, feeds, and bringing in that streaming information in context with, call centers. So that's another POC in commercial lines. A use case that I've seen just within the last couple of months is how do I bring in third-party data sources that contain information about property information, and being able to quickly leverage that against my existing portfolio to evaluate it in the construct of a catastrophe. So various different formats and POCs, so forth. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention also, just with regard to costs, it's not just about infrastructure costs. One of the other things is human resource and human capital costs for development, and that's the great thing about the Hortonworks Informatica partnership is Informatica really reduces a lot of the hand coding and the specialized coding skills that are required in order to implement a Hortonworks infrastructure, so that if you have skills around traditional, what we would consider data integration or ETL technologies, those are reusable skills that can then be leveraged within the Hortonworks infrastructure. So,
okay. Next question is can data be loaded into Hadoop transactional basis, and will it always be batch processing? Hadoop originally was batch processing, but if you look at the current version of Hadoop in 2.2, and the various other items. Hadoop is now both batch and real time. So I would point you to the sandbox to look at the capabilities of the current Hadoop distribution and what's available.
Yeah, and a lot of that does relate also to, how you build your Informatica integration jobs and components. So it's really kind of up to the developer in a lot of cases.
Right. Okay. Next question, and I'll take this one, and Josh will get your perspective, is we're a mid-tier carrier, and we use some predictive analytical models today, but our data volumes aren't large. Are there areas that you're seeing advanced analytics being used most prevalent in commercial lines insurance? As I mentioned, it's interesting within commercial lines, both from a commercial auto perspective. Companies are now starting to leverage the telematic information. From an underwriting perspective, as Josh mentioned earlier, being able to go after the structured and unstructured information of an application and ingesting that information. It's both from a application processing perspective and then enhancing that data with the various predictive models. So taking the traditional data that we have and helping the underwriter with going out and doing related entity analysis within a various risk to maybe look at supply chain. So those are some of the use cases that I've seen.
Yeah, and I don't think I could have said it better myself. I mean, predictive analytics is, it's pretty hardcore stuff, a lot of math involved, and so a lot of the predictive analytics that I see going on is yes, about underwriting and about property risk and et cetera, but it's also about, as I mentioned, the portfolio, because large, especially in commercial insurance, large accounts or single risks can greatly sway the portfolio, and so being able to understand portfolio risk and look at it in a predictive way using some predictive models and simulations is an important way to understand the strategy, the business strategies around portfolio guidance, which then can flow down into underwriters and brokers, et cetera, when people look to bring business on.
Yeah, and Josh, you made me just think about another scenario, and you had articulated it before, where now being able to store more data at a lower grain of detail allows companies to better analyze. So in the past, when you looked at, from a especially commercial or even personal lines perspective, regarding the hit ratios and why did I win this business, why didn't I win this business, because the data storage costs, we quickly get rid of quote information that wasn't taken up for business and purge that information off in usually 3 to 6 months. Now with a more commodity-based platform to store data at a lower storage, we're seeing companies saying, hey, I can now store multiple years of information to enhance my predictive model. So again, the level of granularity as well as the volumes of data is enabling companies to do analytics over a longer time frame, should they so choose.
Yeah, and people say insurance is boring, but this is the non-boring part of insurance. I mean, if you think about just all of just take personal lines and the direct model, right, where people are going to websites and they're clicking through different steps and they're maybe abandoning their quotes. Imagine if an insurer of any ilk could save all of those different abandonments and analyze and look at trends within their data, look at markets they should be serving or demographics that are coming up, and there's all sorts of different really cool things. And before, you may have saved that for a little bit and then chucked it out or not known what to do with it, and now you can actually analyze a lot of that data to look and figure out where to grow your business.
Well, Josh, I don't see any other questions. I think from a wrap-up standpoint, Josh has illustrated kind of some next steps. There is the sandbox where you can actually download the Informatica and Hortonworks sandbox to actually look at information. There's some demonstrations. There's some different use cases that are in there. So Josh and I welcome you to do the downloads. There's also the machine data and data streaming. Josh will probably be able to speak better to the 5 data stream, as well as more information on our joint partner location, which is hortonworks.com partner/Informatica. So Josh, if there's anything you want to add on the Informatica side.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of online resources, so please go out and check those out. Go to informatica.com/insurance. You'll be able to download all sorts of different documents, and it's an ongoing effort. We have to continually refresh that the stuff that's available out there, including videos and soon to be some really robust analytics demonstrations that are out there on the web. So please visit these sites when you have a chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much for the excellent information. And if that's all we have, then everyone have a great day.